This video describes an initiative to improve employability among young people living in rural towns and villages in South Africa. The aim is to establish small computer centers run by local entrepreneurs who will be able to earn a living while providing computer training to their peers, which will enable them to gain access to work opportunities. South Africa faces a crisis in the form of a large number of unemployed young people, the majority of whom do not have skills to offer the marketplace. We'll be focusing in on the 7 million young people living in rural areas, 4 million of whom are not in employment, education, or training, the brown segment on the chart. None of the options available to these young people are promising. They could join the stream of rural people migrating to the cities. If they choose to remain, they'll be subsisting on another family's social grant, finding some way to make a meager living, or turning to a life of crime. What we have found is a prevailing mindset of failure, disappointment, and disempowerment. Some even say they've failed so often they're afraid to fail again. In fact, they will make life choices based not on an interest or passion, but on the least likelihood of failure. But it is here, where poverty is greatest and resources most limited, that we've chosen to base this intervention. We believe that if it can show positive results in this environment, it will open up the way for a much wider implementation in the future. So, with that background in mind, what if we could take a comprehensive technology-based digital skills program, introduce it into rural towns and villages through engaging young local entrepreneurs, and help them to run a business through providing computer skills to other young people? What if the design and execution of the program could not only equip them with useful skills, but in the process build their self-belief and a confidence to compete in the marketplace? What if we could find a way to connect them to employment opportunities, which might even grow into a meaningful career? Imagine if they could become included in the digital economy instead of excluded. From our experience so far, we can say that such a model, in order to operate at scale in a climate of extreme poverty, needs a funding model that would stimulate engagement while avoiding the demotivating effects of grant aid. The first critical success factor on which we will focus is the manner in which the program is run. Traditionally, training programs run for a fixed time, a week or a month or a year. At the end of that time, it's assumed that some students will succeed very well, the blue line, some will do moderately well, and some will fall below the minimum, the red line. In our experience in the corporate world, such students, invariably from a disadvantaged background, have huge barriers to overcome and struggle to master the basics before the facilitator has to move on. They're eventually left behind and are regarded as untrainable, thus reinforcing their sense of failure. When technology becomes the medium of instruction, it's possible to allow the disadvantaged student to spend time mastering the basics, moving at their own pace and in privacy, being able to repeat assessments until they've reached a high target. This builds into a virtuous cycle of small wins, which build confidence. In time, these so-called slow learners move faster until many of them progress at an expert level by the end. We've had experience in the corporate world of a group of untrainable young people who, when exposed to this alternative learning model, all mastered the material and went on to play a meaningful role as employees. This is the model used in running the program in the rural centers. A second significant factor in the training program is its extensive use of simulations as a means of instruction and assessment. Simulations present a real-world image of what the student is learning, and the student responds by doing rather than memorizing information about doing. The result is a far higher retention of knowledge and the ability to learn more faster, because visual memory is such a powerful agent in the process. The training content covers all the computer applications used in the average workplace, including an introduction to IT, which equips users with the language which underpins all things to do with computers. The course duration is about 3 months at 4 hours per day for students who start with no prior knowledge of computers at all. Students who have some exposure already generally move through quicker. There is something interesting and quite significant about the platform used to deliver the training. Because the centers are remote, connectivity is less reliable and bandwidth is low. The setup involves loading all of the content on the local workstation, but having a connection to our server in the cloud which manages the logins and stores all results. As a result, there's a real-time connection with students and their progress, no matter where they're located. There is another aspect of the training which, though it speaks to the approach to the training, it does, I believe, play a major role in determining the outcomes. Here's a picture of what typically happens on the first day when a new group begins the training. The facilitator sets the bar, 80% on each assessment before you move on to the next. And this is the predictable response. The facilitator, no stranger to this reaction, is quite relaxed in his reply. Thus reassured, the class agrees to try out this new approach. Interestingly, within a few days the pendulum swings, and they start to reach this goal, which they thought was unattainable. The best thing is they've done it themselves. From then on, they drive themselves through the program. The aggregate results for the over 3,000 students who've been through this program are impressive. Their average score over the 140 assessments that each student has completed is 89%. Just as remarkable is the completion rate of 99%, which means that by far the majority of students who start this program complete it. The significance of effort in this training is shown in the next slide. This is taken from a class of 54 students, and we've plotted the final score of each student in the blue histograms. The scale is shown on the right axis, and we've zoomed in so it starts at 75% at the bottom right and goes up to 100% at the top right. But apart from the score, we've also saved data for the number of attempts each student made per assessment. In other words, how hard they worked for their score, or the effort put into achieving the score. We sorted the class on the basis of the number of attempts, from the least on the left to the greatest on the right. The axis for attempts is on the left side. The red line shows that the first 10 students on the left averaged just over 1 per assessment, over the 140 assessments. From student number 310 onwards, the average attempts increased steadily. Then for the last third of the class, the attempts increased more steeply. Student number 142 averaged just over 4 attempts per assessment. We call the group on the left the quick achievers, and those on the right the persevering achievers. They had all achieved, but those on the right had put in a lot more effort to get there. We decided to look deeper into the effort picture and applied the work done over many years by Professor Carol Dweck into what she called mindset, or core belief. She has identified 2 opposing categories, fixed and strong growth mindset. A person with a fixed mindset holds the belief that we have a fixed amount of intelligence and nothing we can do will change that. Most people in this group want to avoid situations where they might feel stupid, so they avoid settings where they might be shown up. This leads to them making safe life choices where they're unlikely to fail, rather than following an interest or calling or passion. The person with a strong growth mindset believes that we can develop our intelligence through hard work. The more I try, the smarter I get, they would say. They welcome failure because they believe it's the best way to learn. We applied Prof. Dweck's mindset questionnaire to students to see if their mindset type was randomly distributed among the students or followed a pattern related to the effort that we saw in the previous slide. We chose the mindset categories as follows. A was a strong growth mindset, B was growth with some fixed, C was fixed with some growth, and D was a fixed mindset. The next graph shows the results. Here's a graph with students in 3 groups according to their effort: quick achievers, middle achievers, and persevering achievers. The attempts are shown as the olive-green histograms, and the mindset scores on the blue line. The 3 boxes show the scores which relate to the 3 mindset categories. In the top blue box, we see the summary of mindset types in each of the achiever groups. This shows that the majority of strong growth mindset students, A, were among the persevering achievers with 4, and the middle achievers had a further 3. None of the quick achievers showed strong growth mindsets. They were mainly B with 1 C, whereas the persevering achievers had nobody in the C category. This seems to suggest that those students who tried harder to succeed came away with more of a growth mindset than those who achieved more quickly. Although this is early data, the line of inquiry would be well worth pursuing. The next graph answers the question of whether students improved their learning efficiency throughout the 3-month period. Here is one person's journey, a persevering achiever, from the first assessment to the last. The scores are in red. As you can see, they oscillate between 80 and 100%. The green line plots the average number of attempts per assessment. Notice how in the early stages, the student shows signs of struggling, having to repeat between 15 and 27 times before reaching the target. Then the attempts drop down, with the occasional spike, until the last test, the most difficult one, where the student hits 100% on the first attempt. Something has happened during this time, and I think it's fair to say that the student has improved his or her ability to learn. SAQA credits. Even though the students may be learning in a remote village, the nature and quality of the training is such they cover all the requirements to gain credits on the national qualification system. In fact, Skillwise has been approved to produce electronic portfolios of evidence, and our simulation-based assessments have been accepted as valid for testing competency and hence being used in the summative assessments. This has reduced the time and resource requirements for gaining credits and puts young people on an equal footing with their urban counterparts. When we look at outcomes, we hear statements from graduates that reflect a greater confidence in themselves and their ability to achieve through perseverance. They speak of having learned how to learn and to look beyond the confines of their environment to something beyond. On the employment front, the climate is so stringent that there is not much we could realistically promise, except that when they apply for a job and are required to do a computer test as part of the application, they will get to the front of the queue. From experience, we know that they will outperform other applicants whose certificates are derived from a conventional training model, which typically involves very little practical work, by a wide margin. Some informal observations are interesting too. The owner of a centre in Willowvale in the Eastern Cape surveyed all the retailers in the small towns within a 50-kilometre radius of his centre. 80% of the cashiers were graduates from his centre. The administrator at a popular resort on a coast beyond Willowvale is a graduate. One graduate found a job at a security company, and the owner reported that she was productive from day one. Elsewhere we have a picture of graduates moving on beyond the training. 15 of the 35 graduating students in the Valley Trust, KwaZulu-Natal, did not attend their prestigious award ceremony. When followed up, it turned out that they had not attended for 3 reasons. They'd already enrolled for a further education course, unheard of in the community. They'd found a job, or they'd started a business. In other words, they'd moved on. Warning, this program is addictive. This is how the program was described by a new centre owner. It quotes, "The right word to describe the CompuTutor program is addictive. All the 8 learners are addicted. It's hard to get them to shut down after their 2 hours has expired. They all push to finish the levels and to push them up further. The program is very user-friendly, and all the learners after their first session could all navigate themselves through the software without any assistance. The 2 introduction sessions were very helpful in getting learners to familiarize themselves with the program." We turn now to verification of impact and the sponsorship model that arises from it. The infrastructure and training methodology lends itself to real-time verification of impact. This opens up the possibility of a more dynamic model for sponsorship. Let us imagine that a sponsor contributes to the training of 1 or more students. The funds are paid into the account of the Skillwise Foundation, which has a list of unemployed young people who are keen to do the training. The foundation matches individual students with their profiles to the sponsor, and the centre owner is notified of the availability of the sponsorship. The students pay a small fee for registration, which gives them access to the first of 6 modules. The student has to earn the right to continue the training through their own effort. The first task is to achieve an average of 80% for the assessments which they will encounter in this first module. When they reach this target, a proportion of the total funding for the student is released from the foundation to the account of the center owner. A message is sent to the sponsor informing them of the progress each student has made. The student is given access to the second module, and the process is repeated for each subsequent module until the final certification stage. So the student pays for the training through their effort for continued access to the space, infrastructure, electricity, etc., which the center owner provides. The entrepreneur is able to benefit from increased student numbers as a result of being able to offer a subsidized rate. The sponsor benefits from real-time updates on students' progress and the opportunity to encourage this student on his or her journey. So what is needed to expand this model to bring it up to the scale where 3,000 students could become 30,000 or even 300,000? There are a number of avenues through which individuals or corporate sponsors could be involved in expanding the benefit. Corporate social investment or individual or group donor funds could be used to sponsor students using the model described in the previous slide. Enterprise development funds could be provided to select, equip, and mentor new entrepreneurs to run their own rural training centers. Skills development funds could be used to prepare entrepreneurs more formally through learnerships, providing greater depth of experience in the computer technology aspect, as well as training in setting up a new venture. These centers could form the basis for a more broadly based economic development intervention in under-resourced areas. For further information, please contact us on info@skillwise.co.za. Thank you very much for your attention.